Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Exceeding Your 2018 Revenue Targets with AI and Data. I'm Brian Anderson, News Editor at Demand Gen Report, and I'll be your moderator for this presentation. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today. I'm going to come through a few housekeeping slides here, and firstly I'd like to encourage all attendees to get social with us during and after today's presentation. Please follow along and share your thoughts and feedback using the hashtag SPS17. You can connect with us using the @DG_report Twitter handle, or reach out to me directly. My Twitter handle is @G3Brian, and our presenters can be reached at the Twitter handles listed here. Please feel free to share any questions or thoughts you have throughout the presentation. For those of you who may be new to Demand Gen Report, here's a quick overview. We are an online media company publishing daily news, a weekly email newsletter, special reports, original research, and a rich menu of additional resources. If you haven't done so already, join more than 45,000 subscribers to our weekly newsletter by subscribing to Demand Gen Report today. For today's presentation, we're using the On24 platform. During the presentation, you can access all the information you need from the platform toolbar. We encourage you to ask our presenters questions. To do so, simply click the Q&A widget at the top right corner of the screen. Today's presentation is slated to run about 25 to 30 minutes with 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A following the presentation. You can submit your questions using this Q&A widget at any time. Today's session is being recorded, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation to go back and review or to share with your colleagues. In addition to joining the conversation online and submitting your questions here, we also welcome and encourage you to let us know how we're doing. In an effort to constantly improve the level of value we provide to our audience members, we've put together a very brief survey that will automatically launch once the webinar session ends. You can pull up, complete, and submit the survey at any time you'd like during this webinar by clicking on the survey icon in the taskbar on the bottom of your screen. You can see here the survey icon is circled at the bottom of the slide. Before signing off today, please take a moment to complete this quick questionnaire. Doing so will help us better serve you in the future. Now I'm pleased to introduce our featured speakers for today, Miguel Gurnay and Nipul Chakshi. Miguel is the VP of Integrated Demand Marketing, the worldwide VP of Integrated Demand Marketing at Sage Software. Miguel is an experienced marketing, digital, and business leader recognized for his ability to lead profitable growth through a combination of strategy, humanity, creativity, analytics, process, and technology for the past 20 years. Prior to Sage Software, he worked at Dell, managing the EMEA demand center there. Nipul runs product marketing over at Lattice Engines. Prior to Lattice, Nipul built and ran the solutions marketing and sales enablement functions at Yammer, which was acquired by Microsoft in 2012. Before Yammer, Nipul led product management and marketing at Marketo and Merced Systems, which was acquired by Nice Systems. Without further ado, I'll pass things over to you, Nipul. Take it away.
Thanks, Brian. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. My name's Nipul Chakshi. I'm with Lattice Engines, and we develop B2B apps for sales and marketing based on AI and data. And the problem that we solve is something that's familiar to all of us in B2B sales and marketing. More and more, there's data available about our prospects outside on the internet, as well as within the four walls of our enterprise. The challenge, however, that we face as marketers is making that data available and usable in a real-time fashion. As marketers, if you're in marketing ops, for example, or in sales ops, if you're looking to be able to kind of leverage some of these external data sources from third parties like D&B, HG data, and whatnot, some of the challenges that you'll see is you'll need to kind of aggregate all of this data from multiple places, make sure that it's all cleaned and deduplicated, And then you want to make sure that that data is then available in a real-time fashion across your ad targeting systems, across your marketing automation systems, CRM systems, all the day-to-day platforms that we as marketers live and breathe in order to be able to run our campaigns. And so what we do at Lattice with our solution is customers are able to leverage our solution to really accelerate their revenue by leveraging the data that we provide, as well as the artificial intelligence and predictive modeling capabilities to be able to have kind of the complete knowledge about each and every one of their prospects and customers. Ultimately, companies are able to use that knowledge and insights to be able to run more targeted campaigns and more targeted sales outreach so that they can improve their net new customer acquisition rate as well as improve their relationships with existing customers. The foundation of our solution is really, again, based on data. As a company, we've invested over the last 10 some odd years in developing almost what I like to consider a DMP for B2B sales and marketing. This consists of information on 200 million plus companies around the world, big and small, across every industry out there. We're able to track over 20,000 indicators about each and every one of those companies. Things like, what kind of technologies are they using behind the firewall? What kind of website traffic are they experiencing? What kind of social and online presence do they have? Our users at those individual companies, what are they actually searching on? What are the topics of interest that they're actually researching and exploring? Perhaps as a marketer, giving you an indication of whether they're entering a buying cycle for a particular area or a particular solution that you might be providing. Growth trends. Are the companies actually expanding? Are they hiring? Are they doing layoffs? Are they signing leases and expanding geographically? How is their revenue trending over time? So the idea is that we've kind of invested in developing this platform that enables us to kind of make this data, all of this data, available to our customers in a real-time fashion. On top of that, customers will use our platform to create predictive models. And what those predictive models will do is help you to identify what are the attributes that help you to that actually make up a good lead, a good contact, and a good account. And this goes beyond some of the assumptions and some of the kind of the attributes that you may be using today, beyond just the industry, the employee size, the revenue. This goes beyond and deeper in terms of when was the last time a company potentially got funding. Perhaps that's an indicator of whether a particular account is a good fit for you from a new business standpoint. Perhaps it's indicator around what kind of technologies they're actually using. Are they investing heavily in HR technologies or product lifecycle management? Perhaps, again, that's another signal that you can use to be able to identify and to be able to target companies in your target account universe in order to actually convert them. What we'll do is we'll make these analytics and this data available to marketers and to sales folks within the tools that they live in on a day-to-day basis, whether it's web personalization and ad targeting systems, whether it's marketing automation systems, and whether it's CRM apps. Ultimately, as a result, once the data is actually available, this data and analytics is actually available to them in these systems, demand gen marketers and sales folks are able to run a variety of different kinds of plays. The slide says ABM plays, but if you're not doing account-based marketing, you can use them to drive personalized demand gen and lead generation campaigns as well across a variety of different channels, ranging from digital ads to email to kind of your sales channel to field marketing and road shows, as well as direct mail campaigns. I've been fortunate at Lattice to have worked with some of the largest companies out there when it comes to actually helping them to see value from AI and data. So companies like the ones that you see on the list here will are able to take our platform and turn them into measurable measurable return on investment. At the same time, we'll also work with high growth brands, up and coming unicorns, big kind of companies that are about to kind of break out, if you will. What they'll do is they'll leverage our platform in order to be able to drive growth from a net new customer acquisition standpoint, as well as a standpoint of actually improving relationships with their existing customers. Ultimately, all of these companies that use Lattice are able to use the predictive modeling and the data that we provide to run a variety of different kinds of campaigns. What I've got listed here are just some examples of campaigns that our customers will typically run when it comes to, again, driving net new customer acquisition or increasing cross-sell, upsell, improving retention and churn, and so on and so forth. We'll specific example shortly, but at a high level, our customers see significant improvement in terms of their business metrics across the entire funnel. Companies are able to leverage AI and data to be able to drive value, not just at the top of the funnel when it comes to increasing the names in your database, but also taking the names that you've got in your database, accelerating them and making them sales ready, converting them once sales actually engages with them, and then ultimately making sure that you're retaining them once they turn into customers, and then ultimately selling them more. And so what our customers will do is they'll start with one end of the funnel and kind of work their way across the board, if you will. And so one of the things that I'm really excited to do is turn it over to Miguel from Sage. Sage is a longtime Lattice customer. Miguel's been a longtime Lattice customer as well, from his past experience at other companies as well. And he'll talk through how Sage is able to leverage AI and data to be able to drive value and growth within their business markets.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Garnet, and as you know by now, I work for Sage, and I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you a little bit about my history with predictive analytics. The first example I want to show you is one that comes from a previous life where I engaged Lattice to do some work with predictive modeling. And this was at Dell, and you can see there that we, achieved quite significant results with predictive modeling at Dell. The way it worked there was essentially to provide our salespeople with propensity-scored outbound targets to call out on. Essentially, that meant that in addition to inbound leads that they got, they also got a number of targets to call out on. And this would be things like, cross-sell or upsell or renewal of software or, a large number of other things. And some of the results that we saw there was that where we reduced the number of targets we gave to our salespeople to call out on, but gave them higher quality targets, drove the number of targets that were actioned, i.e. followed up and called out on by the salespeople, up quite significantly, with a higher focus on driving new opportunities into the business and focusing on the highest probability targets. We saw a pipeline increase of 66% versus a decline in a test market, which in this particular case was our US market, of 35%. We saw a much higher conversion to revenue, which obviously led to a significant increase in revenue, and we also saw quite a significant increase in the average deal size. Based experience, I decided to engage Lattice at Dell to help us with a number of things. Right? We have multiple business lines at Sage, which basically means we have many different products, and we have many different products within what we call categories or business lines. So, for example, our accounting business line has probably around the world, I think more than 30 or 40 different products, right? But we were wanting to focus that business line on our key cloud-enabled accounting solutions and make sure that we were selling those state-of-the-art solutions to the right customers. The problem was, how would we segment our prospects for those multiple business lines, right? And make sure that we target the right prospect with the right solution at the right time. And because obviously we operate in the small, medium business market, where we have large scale of customers, we needed to make sure that we could be very specific as to which customers we were targeting with those cloud accounting solutions, so we could drive the highest possible return on investment while maintaining the security and integrity of our data, of our customer data. Was to build multiple predictive models that would allow us to run both prospect databases as well as databases of existing customers through those models to understand which of those prospects or which of those existing customers were most suited to the product lines we wanted to sell them, or the product lines we wanted to move them to, because we would think that those solutions would be better suited to where they were at in their business at this particular point in time. We started slow, right? So we started with a very specific pilot, which was around reactivating our inactive customers, right? So that would be customers that still had one of our products but weren't logging into it anymore. That would be customers that recently left us. It was a whole database of customers that was quite large that we had there, and we wanted to see whether we could reactivate those customers onto our more recent cloud accounting solutions. So what we did is we took the entire database of those customers and ran them through the various different propensity models for our different solutions, right? So they were run through our Sage 1, which is our startup accounting solution, propensity model, and then we ran them through our Sage Live propensity model, just so we could see which of those customers were most suited to be targeted with those specific solutions. And then from there, we went on to create, what are high propensity customers for this product, medium and low propensity customers for this product, which would also allow us to tailor the marketing activity that we would put in front of those customers, or that we would target those customers with. And I'll talk about that a little bit more on one of the next slides. Example, our win-back campaign was a personalized and multi-touch campaign where we had run our customers through the propensity models, as I said, and then we decided per propensity bucket, if you like, how we would approach those customers from a marketing perspective. So we did a little bit more than just give those lists of propensity score targets to a salesperson to outbound call on, because we wanted to make sure that we supported our salespeople as much as possible with some marketing activity before they started contacting those customers. So as one example, the highest propensity scored leads by product were warmed up through exact match ads on LinkedIn or Facebook or any other social platform where this is possible. We also communicated to those customers through a very simple two-step email nurture program, which was still product agnostic, but that could lead people to a landing destination where they could declare what product they were interested in, and therefore they would become a marketing qualified lead if they filled out a form on any of those landing destinations and go directly to our salespeople. For all of those customers where this wasn't the case, we then followed up with a targeted outbound call, which was scripted by one of our sales development reps. It was then their responsibility to invite people to a demo of the product that they would qualify the prospect for. And then from there, if that went well, they could enter a trial for the product and ultimately buy it, and then go into our welcome cycle, right? And then, it went on from there, right? So, the other bucket had a slightly different approach, as you can see there on the slide. And then, where we went down on propensity, there was a different approach again. This is one application that we used, Lattice propensity modeling for. We also did some modeling specifically for outbound prospecting, similar to the Dell example I gave you earlier. We also used it for reducing churn in our customers, right? So making sure that we proactively contacted those customers that had the highest propensity to churn from our products. And then, of course, some obvious applications around cross-sell and upsell, because we don't just sell accounting products, we also sell payroll products and payment products. And obviously, if one of our customers in one of our segments is on an accounting product, then why should they not also have payroll and payments, which is, actually a really strong application of propensity modeling. Then some results. So we're at this particular point, we're at the stage where we have run some significant pilots around the use cases that I've described. And you can see there that from a win-back, perspective, we've had, some good results around conversion to opportunities versus where we were before. Reactivation was probably the largest success to date, if you look at where we landed through the pilot versus where we were before. And the same is true across the board when we talk about cross-sell, upsell, outbound prospecting, and churn reduction. So, overall, this has been a really successful exercise. And where we are today is that we are rolling out this capability to all of our marketing teams globally, and then specifically in what we call our Customer for Life organization, which would be responsible for applying, this kind of analytical approach to each of the applications that you see there on the left-hand side of the slide. So we continue to grow our predictive capability at Sage, not just through the application of the capability in our Customer for Life organization, but also in our new customer acquisition teams, where it's become pretty standard now to provide our salespeople with propensity scored outbound targets to complement inbound leads that they're getting, so that we can drive further revenue and opportunities through outbound telesales, basically, as well as further applying predictive analytics to our media efforts, for example, right? We do very little Facebook or LinkedIn campaigns that are not propensity scored in the back end, so that we can, be more assured that we're reaching the right people with the right message at the right time. And back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Miguel and Nicole, for all the great insights. It was great to learn about Sage's journey to find these predictive capabilities and the current success and the future plans you have for it. It was really insightful. Thank you for sharing that. And it also sparked some great questions. But before I get to those, I'd like to remind everyone once again to please share your thoughts and feedback before logging off today. You can do so by clicking on the survey icon, which you can see circled here on the bottom of your screen at any time. You may also wait until the close of the session, at which time the survey will automatically launch for you. So now let's get on to those questions. First question here comes from Emily. Emily is asking Miguel, what advice would you give to a demand gen team looking to start a project with predictive analytics?
I think there's a couple of things that I would advise. One is I would do a check on any data that is likely to be used for propensity modeling, for example, right? Because you really need data that is of reasonably good quality in order to be able to make the the outcomes of the propensity modeling worthwhile, right? You also need to have sufficient historical data. So I think having a strong data set is critically important, right? Secondly, I think it's really important to get buy-in from the right functions in the organization that will be using the propensity score data, right? And most notably, I would say the sales organization, right? Because salespeople do tend to be a little bit skeptical around, for example, outbounding on propensity scored leads if they don't really understand what's behind that, and if they don't really, get enabled to do it with good scripts and talking points and all of those kinds of things, right? So getting the buy-in of the functions that will be using the data that's been propensity modeled, specifically sales, but it also may be media teams or other teams that will be using the data, I think is critically important, right? So I would say those two things are absolutely necessary to do before you embark on this.
Yep, that makes sense. Makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. Next question we have is from Mike. Mike asks, do you have examples of how this could help any paid media efforts? Nipul, you want to take first crack at that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Miguel kind of mentioned one example around using the predictive scores to identify who to target on LinkedIn and Facebook, right? So using the scores to just kind of figure out who to target so that you're optimizing your budget from a paid media standpoint on those accounts that are most likely to convert. That's kind of a standard use case that we see across the board. McAfee is another example where what they're doing is they'll do a lot of content syndication, right? So they have a lot of different partners where they'll syndicate their content out to, and each partner generates a ton of leads. And what they'll do is they'll score those leads using the Lattice platform, and they'll stack rank each of their syndication partners using those scores. And what they were able to do was basically become a lot more data driven in terms of figuring out from an investment standpoint which syndication partner to continue to invest in and double down on, which syndication partner to perhaps pull back on, because in general they weren't necessarily resulting in a lot of quality leads. So that's another example. LiveRamp is another customer of Lattice. So what they'll do is they develop software to help companies become better ad targeting in terms of their ad targeting efforts. And so what they're doing is they're using Lattice as part of an account-based marketing program, and they're using the account scores that Lattice provides to inform their decisions around which accounts to target with ads and which personas within those accounts to target with ads. At the same time, however, we're also telling them through our platform which companies or which of those accounts are investing very heavily in Google AdWords versus display campaigns. And based on that, they're able to actually tweak and show more relevant and contextualized ads. So if they're targeting an ad towards a company that's spending a lot on Google AdWords, LiveRamp has a special plugin into Google AdWords. What they'll do is the copy of the ad will talk about how LiveRamp plus Google AdWords is peanut butter plus chocolate, right? It's a lot more effective. So they were able to actually see a 3x increase in terms of their MQL creation within their target accounts, just because they were able to A, use the scores to figure out who to target using ads, and B, use the data that we provided to have more contextualized or personalized ad copy that they were actually showing.
Really interesting. Miguel, do you have anything to add about when it comes to your experience with paid media and using Predictive to fuel that?
No, I think that was a really great overview. The examples that I mentioned around using, LinkedIn and Facebook is really as far as we have gotten with that at Sage at this particular point in time.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Next question we have is from Stephanie. Stephanie asks, what kind of data preparation, we kind of touched on this earlier, what kind of data preparation did you need to do for this project?
So I think this is one of the things, and this is why I gave this as advice earlier to do better data preparation than we did at Sage, right? We kind of made the assumption that our data was great, and then found out the hard way that it actually wasn't. And then of course we had to retrospectively go back and clean up our data, right? So I would advise people to go through the motions in terms of looking at the data, the completeness of the data, the accuracy of the data, insofar possible before embarking on this on this exercise.
Right, right. Napul, do you have anything to add to that? It'd be interesting to hear how data preparation techniques vary depending on company size. I know Sage is a rather large company doing business worldwide. It'd be interesting to hear the variations for prepping data between different size companies.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. I talk to a lot of prospects. I talk to a lot of customers, and every customer kind of has that question around, oh, what do I like? My data is really messy, or there's just a lot of missing data, right? And so obviously, the more data you put into it, the more accurate you'll get in terms of your predictions. But at the same time, I would also say, I'm also a fan, and kind of, Miguel kind of pointed out, and what some of our other customers have done is approach it from a crawl, walk, run perspective, where you'll take kind of the data that you have and be able to kind of leverage that, right? So maybe all of your data isn't perfect for every one of your different segments that you want to be able to target. What you can do is let's just start with that one segment where you do have, as complete a data set as possible for. So being able to kind of adopt that crawl, walk, run technique is something that has served companies really well when it comes to being able to leverage the data that they already have in order to kind of get started, if you will. A lot of times companies will also come to us and say, I don't necessarily when it comes to doing predictions, part of it is you need to know what were the, companies that we actually won against in the past, So there's kind of this misperception that in order to really get value from this, you need to have a lot of data under your belt or a lot of history around existing wins and losses in order for you to be able to come up with very predictive models. And what we've seen is companies will kind of take an approach of, there's actually two kind of ways, right? So one of our customers, they're a financial payments processor. They started with us in the U.S. They had a lot of great history and a lot of great data, and they were able to get started with their predictive models in the U.S. Then what they did was they migrated over and wanted to expand in EMEA, in Europe. And so they didn't necessarily have a lot of history. It was a new market that they were going into. And the approach that they took was twofold. Number one, they used kind of U.S. models as an approximation. And so, and that was still better than nothing. So being able to use even an approximation based on the predictive models is better than, kind of flipping a coin, if you will, or just relying on someone's gut intuition only. So that was number one. Number two, at the same time, they didn't just look at the scores. They actually looked at the data to have more contextual conversations, right? So when their SDRs were doing outreach in this new market, what they were doing was not just kind of looking at the scores to calibrate who to call on, right? But they were also using the data that we provided in terms of, this is a financial payments processor, so they cared about things like the number of web pages on the website, the number of, whether the website actually had an e-commerce application on it, whether there was a shopping cart there, the number of products that they sold on the website, and those sorts of things. And so the SDRs were able to use that data that we provided to have better conversations. And so at least there was some data that we were able to provide that we were able to augment in terms of their existing target account universe in the new market that they were going into that enabled them to have better conversation and actually get value. And over time, they were able to build up that history so that their scores actually got more and more accurate.
Makes sense. Great. Next question we have is from Mark. And Miguel, we kind of touched on this earlier when you shared your advice about starting a project like this. Mark's question here is, what did your business case consist of when getting internal buy-in?
So yeah, well, we obviously demand modeled this out using a number of assumptions. So we went and looked at how many records do we have in the database, what do we expect to see in terms of highest propensity, and what do we think that how do we think that will convert given the approach that we're taking to that particular segment of propensity, if you like, and then sort of looked at the average contract values for the product that we were talking about, so we could get an indication of what is the additional revenue that we will be able or could be able to deliver from this, right? Obviously, we had to make a lot of assumptions around this initially before we had some actual data, to feed into the model. I think that was important, right? To demonstrate what the potential revenue uplift might be. But then, there was also obviously, some elements around, are we better using sales time, right? If they have downtime because there isn't, an influx of inbound leads, can we leverage that time better, make them more productive, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I think it's important to pull together a business case, obviously, to justify the investment, and that business case has both qualitative as well as quantitative elements to demonstrate the value of the investment.
Great. Next question we have is from Katie. Katie's asking, how did you go about getting sales on board with this initiative? I feel as though it might align similarly to making the business case in general to the entire organization, but is there any specific steps for getting sales on board?
Yes, well, I mean, from my experience, there's really the one thing that is the most important to salespeople is their commission, right? So if you can demonstrate that by using the predictive modeling and outbounding on predictive scored leads, or getting leads that are of inbound leads that are of higher quality because they've been informed, at the beginning of the buy cycle, if you like, by predictive modeling, or whatever the use case is that that you're driving. I think demonstrating to salespeople, or at least being able to give an indication of what's in it for them specifically at an individual level is really important, right? And then secondly, I think being able to clearly articulate the sales enablement elements that you will be putting around what you're asking the salespeople to do. So things like, providing them with scripts or talking points or additional information around this customer that will, allow them to have a much richer conversation with the customer, et cetera, et cetera. I think the combination of those two things is really important to get buy-in at the individual, sales rep level, which I think is important, right? And then, of course, you also need to do the same with the sales leadership, because initially they can be quite, skeptical as well. But I think if you can, demonstrate or at least indicate what the revenue potential uplift is for them, then, it's also easier to get their buy-in.
That makes sense. Nipul, is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Miguel covered it really well. I definitely can't emphasize enough, just based on what I've seen with our customers, and just obviously my own experience with sales, is it's important to show them, right, as much as possible. And we've seen that becomes such an importance that we've actually developed kind of a methodology that our success teams will walk customers through in terms of running A/B tests and all that stuff, so that you can actually have the right reports and things that you can show to your sales counterparts to make sure that they're aware of the value that they're actually getting. The other piece that that I've found is very useful from a strategy standpoint is make sure that when it comes to predictive, you don't want it to be a black box, right? You want to make sure that you're clearly providing an understandable, like a human understandable justification for why it is that a particular lead, contact, or an account is an A account, right? Like is rated the way it is. Is it because they're in a particular industry, because they've got a certain technology involved, because they've expressed intent, because they've come to your website a certain number of times? Like, you want to make sure that you're not just providing them with the score, but the means with which to understand kind of how that score was developed and arrived at. And then to Miguel's point, you want to also make it easy for them to be able to respond, make it easy for them to actually follow up. So you're telling me that this is an A account? Great. Now what do I do? Right? So you want to make sure you're enabling them with the right scripts and talking points and all that good stuff, so that they're appropriately armed in terms of kind of following up on the recommendations that you're making from a marketing standpoint.
Right. Next question we have is from Alan, and it looks like it's for Nipul. Alan's asking, do you track data for companies of all sizes or small businesses? I think this is pertaining to Lattice's platform.
Yeah. I mean, so we'll work with companies that are looking to actually engage with prospects across the board. We've partnered with companies like D&B, and we'll do our own data scraping to be able to track kind of the 20,000 plus indicators and over 200 million companies. And those 200 million companies really are, from the really S side of the SMB, kind of the financial payments processor example that I talked about earlier. That was the use case that they were actually going after. They were going after the mom and pop shops. And so we were able to provide them with data around that, as well as, kind of the Fortune 500 type companies, and we can provide data around that as well. So it's across the board.
Great, thanks for that. It seems that that is all the time we have for questions today, but if any of your questions went unanswered, we'll be sure to have Miguel and Nipul follow up to make sure your questions get answered. Thanks again to Sage Software's Miguel Gernay and Lattice Engine's Nipul Chokshi for such a great session. And thank you to all our attendees for taking the time to join us today. Be sure to check out the rest of the sessions taking place the rest of the week. Follow the link you see at the bottom of this slide here to check out all the upcoming sessions, as well as view any sessions, including this one, on demand. Also be sure to check out our next session taking place today at 3 p.m. Eastern, where the folks at Act on Software will provide a framework for building the ultimate marketing plan in 2018. It's definitely something you don't want to miss. So thanks again for everyone joining us today, and have a great rest of the day.